係啊，好，慢慢啊。
Take your time.
歡迎大家咧就
Welcome. Please get to your seats. This is the second session of public hearing. There are many deputations. Please take your time. Our colleagues will escort you to your seats. There are disabled people, so our secretariat colleagues will help them. So while deputations are settling down, I will try my best to seize the time. Let me remind you, your remarks here today will not be protected by the Legislative Privileges and Powers Ordinance, so you have to be responsible for your own remarks. So in the last session, we have already introduced the government officials, so I'm not going to do it again here. So, as I said just now, we are so grateful to all deputations because you are spending your time to share your views with us. There are many deputations today, so time limit will be 3 minutes each. So you have to stop at the end of 3 minutes because many deputations will be sharing views. After you have settled down, let's begin. First deputation, Ms. Ma Chik-yu, Concerned Group on Neighborhoods. Ms. Ma, please. Can I have a microphone? Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Chairman. My name is Ma Chik-yu from Concerned Group on Neighborhood-Related Policies. I'm not a carer. My mother is a carer. My domestic helper is a carer. The two of them play very important roles in my life. As a severely disabled person, every day I need their care. I would like to say and tell you a story. 2 years ago, the contract of my domestic helper expired and she had to go back to Indonesia for 2 weeks. Unfortunately, my mother suddenly suffered from an acute disease and she had to be admitted to the hospital. During that time, I was so shocked. So I don't know who could take care of me at that time. The residential care homes were full. My family members needed to work. They could not take care of me. So I felt very helpless those days. And finally, I was admitted to the hospital. I was referred by social worker to the hospital. At that time, I was really helpless. There was no way to solve my living problems. I need breathing machines, and so most residential care homes could not admit me. In Hong Kong, there were only a few such homes equipped with the right equipment, but those homes were full already. Right now, there are not enough places in residential care homes, especially for the severely disabled people. At night, if the carers, for example, the domestic helper and my mother, became ill all of a sudden, then no one will be there to take care of me and them. Another point is about the district support centers. I had only used the respite service once. This is a very good service because needy people can be taken care of. But I have only used the respite service once. Why? Because they do not have the right machine and equipment to take care of me. So that's why I gave up that service. Thank you. Right. So you shared with us the situation about not having enough equipment. Next, Mr. Ng Wai-dong. I have 3 questions, or we have 3 questions for the Undersecretary, Mr. Choi. In the Legislative paper, the administration said that home care and community care will be the focus, and residential care homes will only play auxiliary roles. Mr. Choi, concerning carers' allowance, why is it that you only give this allowance for those who care for people waiting for residential care homes before the 30th of October 2017. Now you want to encourage the elders to age at home, but then this is just the opposite. I think you have departed from the principle of aging at home. Now you only take care of those people who are waiting for residential care homes before 31st October 2017. Then you encourage them by offering carers allowance. However, if we are talking about a person in the 80s who is taking care of his wife also in the 80s, then, well, the government doesn't encourage him. You are actually punishing him. So we really doubt this policy of aging at home of the government. Are you really implementing this policy? Is it a pseudo policy or false policy? Mr. Choi, concerning respite service, as said by the deputation just now. Well, number 37 deputation, Ms. Tochi, is also going to ask this question. How long is the average waiting time for respite service? Now, an elderly person has to be able to browse on the internet to know which centers have respite services available. You have to be able to go online, and then you need to call the person in charge. I had once made such a call. If an elder all of a sudden suffers from acute disease, how can he know in advance that he needs respite service? And he may not be able to find a medical social worker right away. If we're talking about an acute disease, how can a person know 14 days in advance? For respite service, it's only we're talking about a lack of respite service on an emergency basis. Will there be community service that can replace the 24-hour respite service? Now there is respite for the daytime. Now, will there be emergency service? For example, if I make a call to you, Mr. Choi, at midnight, then you can give me a telephone number, and then I can get emergency respite service right away. Next, Mr. Lei Kwok-tin. I am 88 years old. And can you hear me? My wife is 83 years old. A few years ago, she got leukemia. So actually, there was blood seeping from in between her teeth. She had bought 2 Chinese herbal medicine books talking about Yunnan, Sichuan, Hubei. So whenever there are medicine recommendations, she will spend money buying those medicines. Those medicines are very expensive because they are sent from overseas. So she reads these 2 Chinese herbal medicine books to fight this battle, and all the way to 28th of October 2018 when she passed away. We have got married for a few decades, and all of a sudden I lost her. I could not accept the situation, of course. I cried from time to time. I think this is like a method of drawing some cakes to satisfy people's hunger. So the government has a few 10 billion asking people to apply for the money, but then there are so many very stringent criteria that people can't really get the money. Even though you have a few 100 billion, you can't take care of the poor. When it comes to CSSA, well, people have to go through means test. The grassrooters live very difficult lives. So I can't get CSSA. I am denied of CSSA. So the government is like drawing up some cakes or pies to fill people's hunger. So the money is there, but the poor is not really helped. When my wife was ill, sometimes all of a sudden during midnight she screamed, and so the whole family could not sleep. The carers did not get support from the government. So why is the government keeping so much money instead of helping the needy? Why are you only drawing cakes to satisfy people's hunger? The government has so much money. I think the government should help the needy poor people. Thank you, Mr. Lei. I see. I hope the administration can hear you. Drawing cakes to fill people's hunger. Mr. Lei Wen-chang. Ladies and gentlemen, chairman, officials, good morning. I am from a group of carer of the elderly. I'm a member. It is really very tiring to care for the elders. I am 78 years old. I take care of my wife, who is 76 years old. She suffers from dementia, early stage dementia, and she is also mentally ill. Well, she has very poor memory. She very often loses her way. She doesn't know where she is. So the two of us take care of each other. Sometimes when I have a fever, I have to go to the hospital. The doctor said I need to be admitted to the hospital, and I said I could not stay in the hospital because my wife cannot take care of herself. So I have to go back home, and the two of us take care of each other. So does the government have any emergency support? Or are there some community nannies for the elders? Will there be allowance for the neighbors, for example? So if there are community nannies, then we can take care of each other. So people who are ill can go to the hospital for treatment with an ease of mind. When I had a fever, I could not even go to the hospital because I had to go back home to take care of my wife. The government offers allowance for the carers. In the past, it's $2,000. Now it's $2,400. $400 more. 90% of people cannot get such allowance. CSSA recipients cannot get it. Disabled people can't get it, and so on. Those people on CSSA and old age allowance cannot get the money. But then these are the grassrooters. $2,000 is not a big sum. Well, if people can get this amount, at least some sort of alleviation is given. Well, I think 50% of the people have emotional problems. Many of them cannot sleep because they face huge pressure. So I hope the government can give more support to the grassroots. Thank you.
陶之女士
Mrs. Tritucci. Good morning. I'm a carer. My husband is 81 years old and I'm 76 years old. The administration encourages aging in place. And it is only natural that I should take care of my husband at home. However, I am elderly and I have quite a number of diseases. Has the administration shown care for the carers? Why should I say so? In 2014, at 2 o'clock in the morning, I vomited, I had a diarrhea, I had a fever, an ambulance took me to the hospital. And in 2014, I shared my experience here in Legislative. Well, the doctor wanted to hospitalize me. Well, if you hospitalize me, what would happen to my spouse? And so at 6 o'clock in the morning, I had to go back, crawl back at home. Because I am a CSSA recipient, would it be enough only for food? And so I could not afford to take a $2 transport home. I spoke about that in 2014. And in 2018, I was again hospitalized. Who should have shown us care and concern? Well, the daycare center, you say that it's available. We don't know much about the daycare center. Even if social workers told us that you could have a 9 to 4 o'clock daycare center service, could it really help us? No. And if I would ask my neighbor to buy food for my spouse, I dare not do that because don't have enough money for that. Well, if I'm hospitalized, could you find a bed for my spouse? No, that's not possible. Why don't you go to the social worker at midnight? Can you find a social worker? That's a problem. My husband is an intellectually impaired person. He will get lost. And if I'm hospitalized, he would be lost. And he kept everything to himself. He wouldn't express his needs. So if you have daycare center, could you have also an emergency support center for carers? From 2014 to when I made known my problem, up to 2018, nothing much has been done. So I hope that more care can be given to us. Well, I am 71-year-old and my husband is about 87-year-old. I dare not be hospitalized. Well, it is easier for him to be hospitalized. Even if I am immobile, then he could go to the hospital, but the contrary wouldn't be possible. So we have enough quorum. So let me take care of Mr. Kokake's motion. Can you read it out? I'd like to thank the deputations and individuals present here. The administration's measure that they have now are not adequate to meet the needs of carers. So I have a motion here. The panel urges the administration to have policies centered on the carers, to protect the carers, and to conduct a demographic survey of carers, to increase emergency support and regularize their allowances, and to improve the existing allowance in the following 4 manners. So they should separate the allowance with the service wait list, so that there can be more carers taken care of. That apart from the level of allowances, you should add the allowances for the use of respite and other services, and also to review the relationship between such allowances and the social security, including the allowances for the disabled. So there should be information and education, and have public applications to allow them to be able to receive such allowances. 4, please raise your hands. So the motion is adopted. Mrs. Wang To-kun, she is from the elderly group for community care of elderly. Let me wish you New Year happiness. I'm 65 years old, and my husband is over 80. He's a chronic patient, and he had a pouch for the urine, and he very often to the hospital. He has to be transported by the ambulances. I am ambulance phobic, and we called the ambulance 3 times a night. For one night, he wanted to jump from the window, and I dare not ask the ambulance again. At the 7 o'clock in the morning, he climbed up the window. So at my wit's end, I had to call the ambulance. The ambulance and the police told me, why didn't you call the ambulance? I said I'm very, very afraid, and I've called the ambulance many times already, and I have a fear of calling an ambulance now. Well, for the OALA recipients, we don't have other supports. You ask us to age in place or age at home. For us, $2, well, for you who have money, $2 is nothing, but we have to count our cents for our groceries. For instance, if I'm hospitalized during the night, should I be discharged? Well, if they chase us off, then I have to be discharged. But I sometimes, if they do not force me out, then I can wait until the morning to take the bus or public transport. Now I have to go back for consultations. I can only I can afford $2, and I would walk with my stick. Now I go to the charity center, and I don't even have the living allowance for carers. I have been sick since 2002. I have mental problems. Why should the government be so harsh? For instance, the Association of Elderly have helped us. If they had not helped us, then we would have gone to paradise already. Now, we are now being admitted to the elderly homes now. Well, you should help us, because we are in dire suffering. We had not much care. I'd like to thank the Elderly Association directors. If it were not for them, we would have gone already. Exactly. This is why we need have public hearing, so that we have a policy for carers. Thresholds are too high. For instance, those who benefit from OALA would not be eligible for such living allowances. Mrs. Yun Suk-yan for elderly, long-term elderly care. The government says that it attaches importance to the contributions of carers, but we cannot see that being manifested. For instance, elderly carers are being excluded from carer services. For instance, aged carers on the grassroots, they need financial help and also respite. But now you say that there is a CCF living allowances for carers. However, elderly carers cannot obtain such allowances because of the CSSA and the OALA. Now, the CCF fund aims to help those who are outside the safety net. Well, when I look at the web page of the CCF, it says here that including those in the safety net, if they have special needs, the CCF should extend help to them. As for elderly carers, they are precisely those people. Even if they are in the safety net in CSSA and OALA, they still have special needs. Well, CSSA are mostly elderly people, but that benefits from them. Why is it that elderly who are carers, why is it that they cannot enjoy services and they cannot enjoy living allowances? As for respite, well, as for Mrs. Tosi, when they are sick, unforeseen situation of falling sick, there are no emergency support for them. They could only continue as they are. So the living allowances should ease their stringent requirements, excluding the limitations for CSSA and OLA beneficiaries. Now, hidden carers or elderly, it's difficult to find them out. There are cases that are known now, but however, there is no systematic help given to high risk carers. We need such a system to find them out. And for the 1823 telephone number, it still cannot be very effective. Mr. Jiang Ming, I have an AHD son, and who is now 10 years, and there are lots of sufferings that we have gone through in the past decade. When he was diagnosed, we discovered that he had a problem, and we went to the hospital to have consultations. However, the wait list is very long, and so we went to a private doctor for diagnosis, and we continue waiting. And 2 years later, we were able to benefit from the service. We hope that the administration can extend more resources to the parents so that they can have more training. They know more about such impairment in order to give good care to their children. And in schools, most people in the schools don't know much about the ADHD, and they don't know how to deal with such children. So social workers and the schools and professionals should have in-job training so that they can have the means to deal with these children. My son is in a special education school. Well, we know that there are courses in hospitals for the ADHD. However, these courses are scanty, very few of them. Even though you can get admitted, very often you have to have leave from the school in order to attend such courses. Well, they are rather behind in school, and if they have to apply for leave from school, then their schoolwork may suffer and would increase pressure on the family members. Mr. Kwokake had proposed a motion that has just been adopted. Mrs. Au Wing Long. Carers have to shoulder the lion's share of care. The support from the administration is inadequate, unable to relieve the pressure. Well, the Women's Center Association, we believe that for carers should be given more adequate and support to the carers. Apart from sharing their care responsibilities, the emotional support should also be given to them. They should think in their shoes. Well, not only for the elderly and disabled carers, children carers should also need support from the community. So the association feels that in order to alleviate financial burden, you should have retirement benefits for one and all. Apart from carers making efforts and spending their time, financial burden is also heavy for them. Elderly often have all kinds of illnesses and impairment, which money has got to be spent on those. So pension for all should allow elderly to have a decent life, and also would alleviate the burden of carers. And also the threshold for living allowances should be eased to give them concrete support. But the thresholds now, as they stand, are really punishing. And for the carers, limiting them at home, stay home to care for the elderly or disabled. Very often they would not like to go to the residential homes where conditions are really formidable. So we feel that thresholds have to be reduced, and support, emotional support and pressure alleviation should be given to the carers. However, the support centers are rare and not enough. So I feel that the respite services should be included for carers, and institutions should be given the means of respite for carers, the numbers of which should be increased to shorten the waiting time for carers. Lastly, carers' definition should be enlarged to include carers for children whose care is not being remunerated now. So carers for children should also be taken care of to reduce their pressures. From the Salvation Army for Elderly Care Association, my name is Chun-yu. For the support for carers for disabled elderly, we have the following suggestions. For the low-income pilot scheme for the living allowances, this pilot scheme should be regularized, and thresholds should be reduced or lowered to allow them to apply. They should take into account not their income, but disposal income. That is to say, their income minus their basic expenses. And such allowances should also be a recognition of the role that they play. As the community is aging, in order to solve the problem of lack of personnel and homes, support should be given to home-based care to reduce the demand for resident homes. So allowances should be given for the purchase of relevant equipment or the travel expenses, etc.
As to the amount of money to be reimbursed, it depends on the degree of care needed. In other words, if somebody has been assessed as being seriously impaired, then the allowance should be of a larger amount and it should be disbursed on the reimbursable basis. And if there is a means testing requirement, then you should be relaxed and there should be a tiered system so that a different amount of allowance should be given to carers of different financial means. And the figure should be between $6,000 and $8,000 so that those who need special care while remaining in the community, the carer can get this allowance. And then for those who are aged below 60, for those who have early onset of dementia, their carers should be given a different amount, and also carers may also be taking care of children with special educational needs. And then I think the social workers should also provide referral service so that those who are in need can be referred to the relevant service unit. That's all I want to say. Thank you. Thank you. Next, Mr. Jiang Qingfat from the Community Care and Nursing Home Workers General Union. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members. Well, there is an acute shortage of places in the subvented homes. As the Secretary has said, for the care and attention homes, I think the planning has been lagging behind for 20 years, and nobody can tell as to the case of the care and attention homes for the PWDs. Most of those who need our service are still remaining in the community. Before they are admitted to the homes, they need a lot of service, like meal service, escort service, rehab service, personal care, etc. Well, when it comes to community care, when you compare the allowance, when you compare the case with residential care, I think we see shortages and serious shortages in both. Now we have got the home care service teams, and for 20 years the total number has remained at about 20. And then other than taking care of the elderly people, they also have to take care of those who are rehabilitating as well as families with young children. We need to enhance the home care services teams, but then the government has introduced competition. The workers don't have a choice. They are faced with grievance from the service clients as well as heavy workloads. Sometimes we are not able to provide appropriate service, and so our clients are affected in terms of their pace of rehabilitation. So the family members, the carers, service providers are all suffering. In terms of community care and also residential places, we haven't got a long-term planning. The government would only blame everything on land supply, and the government has come up with community care vouchers and residential care vouchers to stop our complaints. In fact, we all want to have quality care, in particular those remaining in the community and being taken care of by the family members. The carers need caring skills as well as basic knowledge. They don't know where to turn to for help. So we would like to ask for an overall review of the demand for home care service. There should be more resources so as to meet the needs and the demand of the service clients. Thank you. Thank you. Next, Ms. Li Yingyi. Thank you. I am a chronic patient. I'm a chronic patient, and I have been suffering from epilepsy since the age of 3. I'm now in my 50s. I'm being taken care of by my mother. Well, in fact, it is a very excruciating disease, but my mother has taken good care of me. And then I became a volunteer after knowing about people in the rehab society. And I have been learning all the time. I try to help my peers, but then many people have been discriminating us. They don't know why we would suddenly collapse and suffer from the spasms. My mother can no longer recognize me because she's now suffering from dementia. I have to send her to a care and attention home, and my father suffers from stroke. He's conscious, but he's paralyzed. He's bedridden. In other words, I have to take care of 2 elderly parents. And yet, I myself am a chronic illness patient. I try very much to help my peers, and so I'm still taking up voluntary work for 20 years now. I think it is right for me to provide voluntary work. I hope people won't discriminate against CP sufferers as well as epilepsy patients. I'm aging. I'm in my 50s. My father is 90 years old. My mother is 87 years old. My mother can no longer recognize me. I have to be her filial daughter. I have to go to visit her and take food to her. My father is paralyzed and he can no longer take care of himself. And from time to time, I have to give him some massage, clean his face. That's what I have to do. It's my duty. But I'm afraid the government hasn't provided adequate support to carers like me and for patients like me. It is very bad to suffer from epilepsy. For the administration, I think the support given is really too little, and they don't care about the voluntary work of the self-help groups. In fact, for each patient and for each carer, I think sometimes it is difficult to distinguish one from the other. And one day you may also have some kind of long chronic disease. Yes, it is a really tiring job as a carer. You don't get any day off, you don't get a break 365 days a year. That's why we have this discussion today. Next, Ms. Lee Shui-hong from the Against Elderly Abuse Hong Kong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm in my 70s. I'm a carer. My father is approaching 100 years old. He's deaf, he's blind. He has problems with his lungs and his kidneys. As to myself, I'm on my own. I have to take care of everybody. I try all my best. I've pain all over me. I'm in poor health. I'm a patient myself. So I'm a carer, but I'm not sure when there would be a sudden onset of an illness. Should I pass away, what will happen to my father? I've been looking for daycare service for him, but I've been told that, well, he won't have a bed, he can only sit up in a chair, but he cannot. He just can't sit up for so many hours a day. In other words, there's not a possible route. Now I tried to get him a place in a care and attention home, but I don't know when he will be given a place. What worries me most is that I pass away before he does. Therefore, I really appeal to you, honorable members, and also government officials. Now that you know about my hardship, I think you really have to find a solution so as to help us as soon as possible. Are we supposed to wait and we don't get to our turn even when we leave the world? We never get a place in the care attention home. Tell me what I am supposed to do. Thank you, Ms. Lee. Indeed, we really hope that the public officers will have the chance to listen to your misery and your sad story. Many of us have been moved to tears. Ms. Leung, well, many deputations and individuals have been sharing their stories. I'm a psychiatric nurse as well as a general nurse, and I've been providing voluntary work at the community level. Well, a few stories come to my mind. Well, they are carers and they're suffering from a lot of pressure. I'm a psychiatric nurse, so I just want to say that for dementia, the patients have problems of different natures, like stress or social problems. They suffer from depression, delusion, quite similar to a mental patient. And they become anxious, and they are very sort of indifferent when they deal with others. So for the carer to face the sudden changes in the person that he or she cares for, it will impact a lot upon their relationship. There was this old man who told me that his wife suddenly forgot almost everything, and his wife has been diagnosed as suffering from dementia. And he has been told that they have to wait for 2 years before she can get her service. But he's getting anxious because he can't deal with her symptoms. They will have a heated argument, and she will say that she has lost many things. And then for 2 years, in the next 2 years, the patient will be getting worse and worse, and the carer finds it difficult and impossible to take care of his wife, and there's anxiety on his part. He has told me that he is getting the old age living allowance, and therefore he can't get the carer's allowance. His question is, does the government show any respect for the carer? Now, the carer is willing to care, to provide care, but then the carer cannot get allowance. In other words, he has to spend $200 a day to get help from the private sector. The OALA is only $3,000. In other words, his savings will be depleted when he spends $200 a day to get help from the private sector to help his dementic demented wife. So a carer is posing this question: why should he be made to dip into his pockets and exhaust all his savings to take care of his wife? And what about daycare service? Is it of help at all? There was a study, and it was found that by spending 2 days at a daycare center, the stress will be eased and the conditions will improve. So I really hope that there will be some mental health support for the carers. And while they are waiting for their service, there should be some temporary service programs for them, so that there will be some respite, and then the carer can take a break, and then the carer can also have the opportunity to deal with emergencies. I've also seen carers who have taken good care of the patients, but they need the support of a foreign domestic helper. And in fact, that person involved was a superintendent of a care and attention home. He was able to maintain the emotional well-being of the demented person. So I hope that the government will take into account the well-being of the elderly persons. Well, in fact, if somebody has to go to a hospital to treat his fever, when he's discharged, probably he's going to spread the infection to the community. I am a nurse, so I can tell from experience. Your time is up, I'm afraid. Next, Ms. Wong Tina. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the support is grossly inadequate. I think the government is doing the minimum only, that is, you are not starving. In fact, the suffering is indeed unbearable. They are asked to queue for a few hours to get treated at an outpatient clinic. And if they have to undergo a test, they have to wait a long time before they are told about the result. We have got many elderly people who are staying at home. They can't go out and they just stare at the ceiling. And other than seeing the person sending a meal to them, nobody knows, nobody cares whether they are still alive. Yes, we may have other personal care services, but then you have to wait to get the service. If you can't, then who's going to take up the chores? If you're lucky, they may have some relatives to take care of them. In the unfortunate case that they can't, then probably they will be sent to a private home, privately run care and attention home for the elderly, and they will never be discharged again. Now, there have been a lot of accusations during this meeting. The support is inadequate. Let's not talk about the living allowance. You say that you are helping the carers, but it is a mere $2,400. Should they spend the money on the elderly person or on anything else? Let's not talk about the very harsh criteria imposed on the applicants. I hope you will address this point in a moment. Now you need to provide more support, more subsidies for the elderly people as well as the carers. At the community level, there should be a number of programs for the carers so that they can ease their pressure and then they can feel better. For the elderly people, they look forward to visitors. I hope the service centers will be proactive and try to approach the elderly people instead of waiting at their own centers before they are aware of the needs of the elderly people. Now, for the homes for the elderly, now I think the government will share the responsibility, and we expect the privately operated homes will be the mainstay. Well, can anybody who's on CSSA afford such a high level of fees? If you say that we are short of land, I think you can set aside 2 or 3 floors in a public housing block for the purpose of running a care and attention home, and it can accommodate a large number of elderly people. Well, I think it seems that you are trying to force family members to sever their ties from their elderly family members. Next, Ms. Chung, the carers platform. Yes, it is an alliance composed of different groups. We do not. We have our own special identity. I hope there is a special policy for the carers.
The policies should be carer oriented. Now I have this binocular here, and I hope that you will hold up this magnifying glass. This is a big one. In fact, sometimes I think the government needs a microscope to be able to see our role. In fact, I have also composed a song so that the government will understand our situation. The song is based on another song on Towering Inferno. So we would like you to listen to our song, Let's Stand, so that the government officials will face up to us very squarely.
病也撐下去，其實我極疲累，難避免內疚實難免，佢係你家人無法推，生命透支，貧病難免，生的死的點都睇不見，可笑是評論太多，關心太少。絕望深淵繼續轉圈，明明嗌晒救命求救，服務又唔做，屋住以犧牲冇支援，無從投訴，無能抗拒接近勒索老諷的態度，無休息也未活得好，快做到趴街，毫無保障，在這塵世的無間做，正是照顧者。
Please face all the carers very squarely and please formulate a carer-oriented policy. We should look squarely at the carers and formulate carer-oriented policies. The government talks about aging at home. In fact, this is like burial at home. All carers have shared their tears and toils with you. The government had procrastinated on the disabled policy and children's policy for a long time. We cannot tolerate further. You are not giving us a way out. I think we cannot withstand even one more minute. When we share our stories with you, I hope that the government is not cold-blooded. Please listen to our feelings and offer more support service. Please be carer-oriented. We are also human beings. We have given up our lives, our time, and our dreams. We have no work. We have no future. We just want some service from you so that we can have better life while we take care of our children and elders. We are not asking for a lot. Please listen to our requests. Yes, just a humble request. Thank you. Mr. Leung Chan-kun from Caritas Carer Center. Thank you. We have heard many real cases. So both the carers and those being cared for are in difficult times. We have to understand carers' needs. Referring to LegCo paper, we can see that the support is by means of information, resources, and training to help the carers to enhance their ability to take care of the elderly. So in other words, they should be enhanced in taking care of the elders so that when they take care of the elderly and the disabled, they have better skills and abilities. So is the purpose reducing the burden for society? If that's the case, then it's not satisfactory. There is no policy right now. We need a comprehensive policy. The policy is not only about the carers' needs and also the carers of the disabled, the carers of the children, the carers for the chronically ill. Not only them, but everybody. They do have their needs. Now only fragmented and separate services are offered. Sometimes people don't know that there are services available. Just now, an old lady told me that she has a friend, fortunately, who can tell her services available. So why can't we think of a case manager system? If there is case manager, then there is professional and social worker to help these needy people to face up to their lives. In future, we are talking about the long run, not today, but the future. So you can do you can offer counseling service and matching service. There is better monitoring of the services so that the carers feel that they are not alone. So they will feel hopeful. Otherwise, people will think of committing suicide. You will feel a lot of fatigue in the process of caring for the others. So there must be a better policy with more appropriate contents to meet carers' needs. So can we have case manager? Can there be relief service? Besides, can respite services be enhanced so that people can get service available more easily? Then they can at least have time to relax. So should the carers' allowance be increased in Taiwan? People can buy respite service, travel service, professional service with the allowance. Okay, $2 concessionary fare, that's fine, but not for the carer. So can there be a more comprehensive policy? Can you really think of the carers' needs? Please help us. In the future, we will also become carers. Right now, perhaps most of you are carers. So you have to think what you need in the carer's shoes. Next, Mr. Chung Sai-Chang from Hong Kong Women's Centers Association. Thank you. Our association is all along concerned about the carers. Not anyone is a carer at birth. Well, carer should be a choice and not an obligation being imposed on a person forcefully. We come across many carers in our work, and they said that workload is heavy and they also feel very lonely. In the community, there are not enough resources. Sometimes they don't know where services are available. So even when they are very stressed, they don't know where they can find resources. In the community, the carers whom we come across are in better shape. More carers are socially vulnerable. They hide themselves at home. They are hidden, and it's difficult to identify them. There were many carers tragedies in recent years, and in fact, our association is like fumbling in the dark. So we offer them service when we see their needs, but the effectiveness is limited. Without a comprehensive carer policy from the government, the community won't be able to have enough resources to offer total help to the carers. Actually, this is not something new. This has been discussed for a long time in many countries. In Australia, there is a carer recognition law. In the UK, Canada, Japan, to different extents, they offer support to carers. For example, carers leave and carers allowance. In Taiwan, since 1998, they offer voluntary service, and then later on, there is a long-term care scheme, which has been in place for 20 years. They had set aside a lot of resources to take care of the carers. In Hong Kong, carers are being neglected. When it comes to carers service, it is being attached to those people who are cared for. In mental health center, there is support service. There in elderly care center, there is another type of service. But if a carer takes care of different types of people, he has to go to different places to get service. Well, carers often don't have enough time to rest. If they have to go to so many different centers, it is like a luxury to them. So carers policy is very important. The government should consider implementing it. In order to have a more effective carers policy, there's the need for very comprehensive data. When organizations want to know more about the carers, we get only fragmented data. We can only make guess based on these data. We don't really know the actual situation. So when the government implements a comprehensive carers policy, there should be a comprehensive database during the census. This item should be covered. Thank you. Next, Ms. Lai Yong-chun. Thank you, Chairman. 10 years ago, our association began to show concern for carers. It's relatively early in Hong Kong, but in different countries, while Hong Kong is relatively backward as compared. Our association is small. In the past 10 years in Tai Po, we just tried our best to find our way in the dark. So what situation are carers in? In the elderly care centers, there are additional resources for carers for the elderly. Can frontline workers really understand the carers' needs? Well, you need to reach out to carers more in order to understand how to support them. In the past 10 years, we did some work. They need to help themselves and they need mutual help. At the same time, we should connect to some district resources. That's what we have done in Tai Po. In the past 10 years, we can see that carers have many needs. Needs in relation to the mental health, the spiritual health, and physical health. And when their emotion is not stable, they scold their family members. And at the end of the day, they will feel very guilty. So this happens more and more to many people. So if the emotional condition is not good, how can they take care of their family members? There are so many different services. As stated in the information paper, the government allocates various resources. But do people know? Carers only know when they know how to come to our center, but there are hidden carers who take care of their family members around the clock. Are they aware of these services? Is there publicity on the television? We seldom see it. We seldom see related service information on the television. So how do you deliver the services to them? This is important. A lot of carers service is attached to different centers. In fact, carers have their unique needs. Carers are human beings. How do they want to develop themselves? We should treat them as individuals, as human beings. We should not attach their services to various centers. Finally, I would like to comment on the carers allowance. So it's being packed to different cash allowances. In our federation, our carers don't even know. And they can only get these resources by queuing up. In the Chinese society, it's very rare that carers can get the allowance because they don't want to be separated from their family members. Thank you. So we will adhere to the time limit of 3 minutes very closely because we have to seize the time. Ms. Chen, greetings. I'm happy to attend this meeting because at least this shows that carers are being given some attention by the public. They are no longer heroes behind the scene. So carers have to put in their physical effort, their time, their patience, their love. If carers are family members, then they are in even worse time. They only put in effort, but they earn no income. I am a concrete example. 6 years ago, my mother suffered from a stroke, and I do not have the ability to employ domestic helpers, so I could only resign to take care of her. I hope that she'll recover as soon as possible. We used Chinese medicine, Western medicine, other auxiliary equipment, and so on. We tried our best, hoping that she can recover as soon as possible. Then I can go back to work. In the first 2 years, I was still able to do it. However, when a family member is ill for many years, well, other family members won't be willing to take care of him or her. So my social circle is getting narrower. I am being forgotten by others. I incur a lot of expenses, but I earn no income. My finance is very tight. I get emotionally very difficult. And my mother suffers because I began to be very cross to her. I sometimes committed rather violent act. So I feel very guilty. When she cried, I also cried. I'm worried that one day there will be one more tragic family, and then my case will be featured on the news. This is perhaps a small problem in society. I had sought help from social workers. They asked me whether I needed to see a psychiatrist and whether I need CSSA. I don't need this. I need some rest while my mother can be taken care of. 3 years later, I got breast cancer. The doctor asked me to relax. Otherwise, my condition will get worse. But how can I relax? My mother is a human being. She is like a burden. In fact, Hong Kong people have longer and longer lives. So very often old people are being taken care of by another old person. The government spends administrative expenses or professional fees. I really feel saddened. Carers are only asking for a small amount, small things. I hope government officials can take care of these. In the future, there will be more and more carers. Thank you. Next, Ms. Yan Kao-wai. I'm from City University. I am a Year 3 student of the social work department. Now I am a social worker intern. I want to tell you how important rest is to carers. So we had organized an event, namely Relax for a While, so that full-time carers have short time for rest. I want to tell you the participating mother's feelings. One full-time mother said, "It is very tiring to be a full-time mother. After his son was born, she had not had an opportunity to enjoy a meal with an ease of mind. So at that event, she felt happy." Another mother said after her daughter was born, she had to take care of both her son and daughter. Every day she had no time, not enough time. She had no time to spend alone. Today she is happy that she can spend some time in the restaurant herself. So every one of them was very grateful to have a few hours for rest. It doesn't matter whether he or she can only sleep for a while or sit idly without doing anything or enjoy a meal in the restaurant. How come a short break is like a luxury to them? The Caring for Carers platform had done an online survey. So on average, each family carer has to work for 13 hours. Telling stories to children, taking care of the household chores, and so on. As a full-time family carer, people have not even 1 minute for a break. There are household work, and also they have to take care of family expenses, the future of their children, tutorial, school, needs to be paid and so on and so forth. So they have a lot of mental pressure. Full-time mothers have to work 13 hours a day, so in 1 year they should be earning 170,000 odd based on the minimum wage. So carers' allowance should be enhanced. We should not underestimate the needs of these full-time homemakers. When it comes to children, even below the kindergarten age, well, their carers are housewives, but then they contribute all their time to their families. So these people should be given carers allowance.
Well, there are not only carers and elderly and the disabled, there are also carers for the children who need care themselves. Mr. Wei Ying, many participants are saying that carers are invisible, and you could imagine invisibility for you yourself, the Undersecretary. When you were unknown to the public, you could understand that. So for the policies, if people are not aware of the policies or the offer or the services available, I hope that you could remedy that. Have you gone for public opinion survey? How many in the public would know about these carer living allowances? What are the thresholds? Well, if I were not in this area of work, I myself wouldn't know about the living allowances for carers. So participants mentioned that the thresholds are very high for these allowances. They have to be poor, and yet they cannot have CSSA. So in fact, there's a lot of needy people are screened out. Undersecretary, you enjoy over $200,000 a month, and you have the means whereby to have domestic help to take care of your family. Now, for how many days of vacation do you have? How many trips have you made for yourselves? And when you were at when you were in a lower post, you were not even aware of the actual situation of grassroots, their living expenses, etc. Well, I have come into contact with a mother who left home because of home violence, and one day he collapsed and he wanted to commit suicide. He wants to jump out of the window, and he said that, well, every day she has been under pressure every day in family care, in family home violence. So I would support the Fernando Zhang's proposal so that they have living allowances for those who are beneficiaries of the CSSA, OLL, so that they can have they can buy respite service of 4 hours. If you calculate hourly rate of 57.5 minimum wage, then it is a sizable amount. For those who enjoy domestic help, you should also take care of the relatives in order to understand the carers' problems. I am from the Methodist Church for the KWONG District Support Center. I take care of a child, handicapped child, and he or she has a bad temper. So, well, I have no respite. I only have breathing space when I sleep. Many parents are in the same case with no respite whatsoever. And at one point I fell on the street and hurt my head. The doctor wanted to give me rest, but I have a child that I have to take care of. And the child is a bad-tempered child. and he had problems in his studies. The district support center has given us time, and so he is now undergoing some training and have a little bit of respite. Well, for respite services, it's very much in high demand. For instance, during vacation, during Christmas or Easter, there are lots of applicants for respite services. However, for a district full of disabled, the respite services are not adequate. For instance, for the KWONG district support center, we have our 1,500 square feet premise, and yet the localities is not enough for the services that we provide. So I hope that LSCSD premises or other premises can be rented for respite services. For respite services, well, there are wear and tear for carers. For instance, for myself, my neck cannot tolerate my standing for long periods. For instance, I cannot cook standing. Well, acupuncture is a kind of relief, but it is expensive. It is a luxury for me. It can relieve my pain. However, I need to spend over 200 for acupuncture, and a month is over 800, and there's no more money for food. So we need to have a relief for such burden. We also need to accompany children to medical consultations. We have high expenses for our commuting. So there should be commuting fare allowances offered. Thank you. I authorize your son sleeping over at the public seats. Well, Mrs. Choi, Kim Hwa, I am sick. I need. I have taken care of a child who is about 30-something year old, and has to have constant blood test. Well, we have she or he has gone to hospitals and has also gone to private homes. Well, the food there is not good, and he has problems with his liver and his spleen. So I dare not send him to private hospitals, and I have brought him home and have given him care all through the year, and I have to go with him everywhere I go. When he was in the private residence, the administration offered some monetary help. But however, when he's come home, I'm under CSSA, and my finance is very tight. And he is a big eater, and he has to have a nightcap before he goes to bed. Well, the doctor tells me that this is how he is. Well, living allowances for carers should be raised so that I could have some time for respite and to go out and for some entertainment. I've never done that before. And there are few opportunities for activities, and I'd like to go out with him so that he can have a better state for his problems. For CSSA recipients, it's very unfair. Well, for 365 days, I take care of him. It's a very heavy burden, and he is always crying out for food and for expenses, money that I can spend. So, I feel that excluding us from this living allowance is very unfair to these CSSA people. We have received your views. Mrs. Zheng, well, living allowances for carers are very modest. The CCSSA, OALA, disabled allowances, people are all excluded. And only CWL waitlist can be eligible for carers' living allowances, and that is very unfair. The living allowances is not for the purpose of alleviating poverty, because carers is a valuable contribution. It is saving the administration resources for the government with respect to residential homes, etc. So they are shouldering a very difficult task. So there should not be any means test for the beneficiaries of the living allowances, irrespective of age or their health condition. As long as they provide care, they should be given these living allowances and not to take away such rights. Many, for instance, special education needs, intellectually impaired, or stroke sufferers, etc., they are excluded from this kind of carers' care. So, well, we have noticed that even though they are in residential homes, the carers should have to go to these homes to give additional help. And it's the same case for hospitals. They need to go to provide their care. So we think that thresholds should be lowered so that they can help needy carers. As for the district support centers, it is important for carers. Some carers, for instance, turning them on the bed or helping them to walk, etc. They need a lot of efforts and strength. So at least now you have to wait 3 years for the services, and sometimes 2 years. You have talked about vouchers. Do you know about the situation of vouchers? And very often they are not fully used. So I'd like to know whether vouchers really offer real help. Mrs. Lee Fung Kay. Carers physically, mentally are challenged, and carers provide a care that is invaluable. Well, respite service can help carers. I have been a volunteer for a long time and have such experiences. And in the search of services, it is we encounter a lot of difficulties. You need to apply. The SWD list out all the respite homes, etc. However, whenever we call, it is already full. And they also need the users' health in order to benefit these respite homes. And they have to furnish all the vaccination papers. And with all these papers and with the user, the home conduct an interview and approval. Once it's approved, 6 months later, they can go in for a brief period of time. Very often, carers fall sick and they need to be hospitalized. And no one knows when you would fall sick. Well, here the case is you need to know 6 months ahead. Well, if you are sick, do you have enough time to apply in time for respite services? And the respite services applications is very complex. And websites are not updated on time. And all homes have different requirements for respite services. And very often, we are ill-adapted to all these different demands. While some respite homes, private respite homes, they are very expensive, 1,000 a day, and grassroots people can ill afford that. Of course, private homes can be applied, and the time lag is short. However, there are doubts as to the quality of service that they can provide. Rehabilitation is very often absent. Increasing respite services, especially respite for vacancies in the subvented homes. We need to revise regulations, and we should take care of the real needs of the carers and the cared. Mrs. Fung Miu-ha. Even if I'm not a direct carer now, however, 20 years ago I was one. The one that I cared for, he or she had no financial problems and could have domestic help. However, you need to make arrangements. Otherwise, the one who has to be cared for, the decline will be very fast. So we have to take care of that ourselves. Well, for me, she insisted in home care, and she's like the emperor. She insists on that, and very often she has to go for consultations. So you need to make good arrangements in order to meet her demands and needs. In particular, for the disabled and the elderly, if an elderly takes care of another elderly, well, it is very physically and mentally demanding, and where can help come from? So the case manager plays a very important role. He has got to analyze his needs and make arrangements and channel the services and channel the supports. For the community itself and for the family members themselves, case management can make arrangements for win-win situations. If the spouse know each other well, they know what they like, what food they can take, can such burdens be relieved when they are hospitalized? No. Even if you are financially capable, it doesn't mean that it will solve all your problems. Even in hospitals, of course, doctors will be responsible. However, 2 weeks later, when they are discharged, I have to arrange for consultations and follow-ups. And I find that the results of the consultations proved to be better than when he or she was hospitalized. And the doctor was surprised that the nutritionist could not do as much. So for the case management, you need to help the family to have more information, to know to have knowledge from the platforms. Since carer plays such a valuable role in the community, the administration cannot ignore their role. Mrs. Ingman-Chi, for the AFD, you know that grandmother had killed a grandson with ADHD because carers are isolated, are helpless. Well, if the child cannot do his homework, cannot have playmates, and when they're rejected by the family members and they're being discriminated against, and they have to wait 2 or 3 years before they can enjoy services, very often they have to pay for their medical consultations, etc. These are real cases.
They have to sell their home so as to get the financial means to help the child. There was this mother who had to quit her job so as to take care of the son because 7 domestic helpers couldn't cope. And at the end of the day, she had to divorce from the husband and she had to be put on medical help. So what I want to say is that just now, it is said that social workers should be given on-the-job training so that they know how to deal with the ADHD children. Now, we do have service being provided by the government. You have to wait for 2 or 3 years. And then that's for parents as well. And you can't find time from your work to attend such programs. I think it's better for you to give the money to the NGO so that there will be free lessons or free courses for the ADHD carers. And certainly, I hope that at the community level, I think we can have focus groups for the ADHD parents. This is because currently at the district centers, nobody has the knowledge to help the parents. I hope there will be parenting skills, there would be after-school care, so that they are given concrete help. Fourthly, I think there should be professional help. There should be regular financial subsidies to help the parents to provide peer assistance. And then there should be a carer's allowance without means testing, and it should become regularized. For ADHD children, you don't have any tax deduction and you don't have any specific allowances, but that should have been done. And then the government should also make sure that a psychiatric doctor can attend to the ADHD child. You have to spend time and money to take your child to see a doctor. I think we should allow them to work flexible hours and they should be allowed to take leave from their job. Next, Mr. Lee from the Association of Parents of the Severely Mentally Handicapped. For the PWDs in the year 2013, there were 570,000 in Hong Kong. For those who are mentally handicapped, probably we have between 70,000 and 100,000. Among whom, 200,000 of them live in the community. And their carers are either family members, parents, or children. Some work partially part-time or some kind of work. So I think the government should take this matter seriously. So far, we haven't got a comprehensive policy. For us to ease the pressure on the carers, I think the most direct way is to reduce the workload and provide them with respite care. I will only talk about one particular point, say for example, more temporary respite places. During long weekends, you can't easily get one. You can't even get one 2 or 3 months in advance. And it takes a long journey to get such a place. And then many service centers would refuse the application on the ground that if the PWD has a stoma or other more complicated issues, saying that they can't cope. There should be 24-hour hotlines. If the parent is ill or if the parent has a sort of emotional problem, they just don't turn to the medical sector for help because they don't know who will take care of the children. And then for the living allowance, I think it's a way to recognize the work of the carer. I don't think it should be mistesting. The allowance should be given to the carers, and then the criteria are too harsh. I think that the threshold should be lowered. No, I think currently the policies are patient-based. Instead, it should have a policy that is carer-based as well. I think there should be statutory holidays to allow the carers to take time off, and we have to safeguard the rights of the carers. Well, people would think that when you are buried, then there's a peaceful end to your life. I'm afraid in the case of the PWDs, it seems that the carers are being punished. The better you can take care of your family member, the less you can get from the government. Mr. Matthew Cheung has said that there will be a new policy, and he tries to put himself in the shoes of the grassroots applicants. I really hope that all public officers will learn from him. Thank you. Next, Ms. Chiu. From the New Healthy Center. It's a mutual help group for the stroke patients and their family members. Now, the government has said that they have a lot to offer concerning support to the carers. I want to talk about the community care vouchers. There are 3 points I want to make. First of all, I think the fee is still expensive. The service providers are either social enterprises or NGOs. Last week, the Consumer Council published some findings. I think the fees are on the high side. For social enterprises, I think the difference could be 4 times that of the private service. Now, I'm afraid the vouchers are not going to help us much. And then there's this escort service. Again, it is confined to public healthcare organizations. What about traditional Chinese medicine and massage or other private healthcare providers? None of them will be covered. And then transport. Taxi would be the only allowable means. Other convenient or accessible form would not be allowed. I think you can understand that if an elderly person is using a walking aid, it's difficult for him to hail taxi, not to mention someone who's wheelchair bound. Home care and cleaning work, the sessions, the number of hours, etc., are all very restrictive. And then they will not have the same helper every time. In other words, it is very time-consuming, and it's also creating a lot of invisible pressure. If you have got 10 different helpers on 10 different occasions, and then the supervisors have to brief the helpers, I think there should be some refinement so that the current policies will be improved. Thank you. Thank you. Next, Ms. Wu. She's from the Christian Family Service. I'm at the front line taking care of elderly people. As to the pressure, how much is that? I think you have heard many stories. Time is running out. I just want to make 2 suggestions. First of all, there should be a respite leave in order to ease the pressure on the carers so that they can relax themselves and have a better quality of life. Mr. Chairman, we have heard the stories, many people have shared their stories with us, but then they are real life stories. Many carers of elderly people, they do it day in, day out. Even when they go out to buy food, they have to hurry home because they don't want to leave the elderly person alone at home. So if this goes on for 10 years or more, and they won't be they won't be aware of the services available. They would always cry when we approach them, when we reach out to them. I think the best arrangement is to get somebody to visit the elderly person at home. I think for general employees, we have a rest day whenever we work 7 days. For carers, I think they must be given a day off. They have to take a break, and they have to attend to their personal business. I think the government can provide subsidy so that carers can be paid to visit the elderly person at home. I think it's like it is like babysitting, and then at least the carer can go to see a doctor for his own condition without being too worried. Now, currently, a carer cannot get a living allowance if he's already on CSSA. But then the CSSA is to supplement their basic needs. And for OALA, this is to give recognition to the previous contribution of the elderly people to the society. Well, in the policy papers, we understand clearly that the living allowance for carers is for a purpose as stated below. That is, it is hoped that the carer can help the subject of care to remain in the community. It is a supplement, and it is a recognition of the status of the carer. So we urge for a review of the living allowance for the carers. The restrictions should be removed. And then, Chairman, please ask the Undersecretary for his reply to the following questions. First of all, will the government explore the feasibility of having a respite leave? Second, will the government dispense with the requirement that CSSA and OALA recipients cannot apply for the living allowance for carers? Thank you. Next, Ms. Mock. Parents Association for the Mentally Handicapped. I think there should be a 24-hour hotline for the carers. Currently, we can only approach the welfare sector service providers during the office hours. We don't get emergency help. According to the Census and Statistics Department, 72% of the PWDs live in the community, and they're being taken care of by their family members on a long-term basis. Sometimes they suffer from accidents at home. There may be criminal cases, and the PWD may sort of cannot find his way. I encountered it for the first time, and I was really worried. And then the caretaker was approached by me, and I helped, and I asked for help. And then after 2 hours, my son was found. He was already injured. At that time, my mind was blank. I was exhausted. I didn't know what to do. At the end of the day, I said that yes, an ambulance should be sent. At that time, if an emergency hotline number was available, then I think I can benefit a lot from professional advice. So I would strongly urge for the setting up of a 24-hour hotline to provide assistance to the PWDs as well as their carers. And then other people have also said that we need to provide respite service so that we can provide some temporary assistance during the holidays. Yes, indeed, we have the temporary day respite service as well as the temporary residential respite service. However, if you really want to get a place, you need to call each and every center by yourself. And as Ms. Lei Fong King has said, there are a lot of difficulties. Each and every service center will have its own criteria, and to say no to the requests of the carers who are taking care of the children or the elderly people or the PWDs. I think the SWD should standardize the criteria. I hope the administration will mandate that all the organizations should update the availability of respite places on the website of the SWD. And then we should also provide a better support system to detect problems among the newborns and young children. Currently, you have to go through a lot of hurdles before you get a referral. Next, Ms. Zhang Puilan. I'm a parent of a mentally handicapped child. I have a number of points to make. First of all, you need to recognize the contribution of the carer, and you should safeguard their rights, and you should legislate for that. Without legislation, it is not going to be effective. Now, in recent years, the government has been more generous in providing resources. But then when you compare our case with the UK, Australia, and Taiwan, we are only at a preliminary stage. Well, in fact, carers should be given training, carers should be allowed to leave, and then somebody should be asked to stand in for the carers. If we are too welfare biased, then it is not going to work. For PWDs, we, the carers, would like to get the living allowance, but then we have to undergo the means testing. It is a kind of disrespect towards the carers. I think the government should have statutory recognition of the contribution of the carers of elderly people as well as the PWDs. So there should be more training for the carers, and you need to provide more information for the carers. You should provide professional counseling for the emotional well-being of the carers. I have taken care of my son for over 30 years, but then for younger parents, I think they are not able to cope with the emotional stress unless, unlike in my case. So perhaps they should be given assistance in that regard. I think there should be some financial subsidies. This is a way to recognize their status as well. It should be a two-tier system. When it comes to the living allowance, I think it's a matter of supplementing their needs and allaying their fears. And then there should be day respite service and residential respite service. This is because for PWDs, we don't have a sufficient number of residential places. Parents would be making calls all around the place, and we always get a no for an answer. I think the government should standardize the arrangements, and then perhaps there should be a central waiting list. Well, a parent had this experience. He had been calling many homes and he could not get a place for the child. Now, for the PWDs, yes, the PWDs are waiting for a place in a residential home, but then the progress has been very slow. We haven't seen any increase in the number of places. Can I finish? Yes, just a few words. Well, the waiting list has got over 10,000 applicants on it. And then for the escort service, you pay $100 per hour. I think the government should subsidize us. Sometimes you spend $1,000 to $2,000 a month for this purpose. And then for hospitals, we as parents are worried because sometimes our children are admitted to hospital, and yet to our surprise they have been there for a whole day and they haven't eaten at all because others don't know how to help them to feed. Number 72. I'm disabled. I'm on disability allowance. I get $6,800 a month. Undersecretary and other public officers, try to imagine how you can live on $6,800. You spend $3,200 for your rent on your rental, and then you have 3,000 something to feed yourself and to meet other expenditures. My living conditions are very poor. The other day, I went to the court because the building is going to be demolished. The undersecretary or the secretary herself should understand my plight. My father has passed away. I'm on CSSA. I'm separated from my mother. This is because she makes $9,000 a month. She can't support me. So my question for the administration, would you step down in order to show your accountability because you failed to safeguard our interests? In the past, I didn't want to rely on the government. First of all, for the new arrivals, I think the government has been very generous in the welfare payment. I'm making this argument. This is because there is a 60-year-old who married a 30-year-old, and then they have a few children who will take care of the children. And then when I asked this question, then the answer was that yes, they should be supported because they have the need.
If there is such a need, then for 100% disabled person, shouldn't you consider their needs even bigger? Telephone fee subsidy. 2 years ago, I started to receive CSSA, and when I applied for CSSA, you did not tell me about that. Then my telephone became out of order, and I asked whether there is any subsidy to buy a handset, and I'm told that there was none. There was only a subsidy for paying the subscription fee. Then can you help me follow things up for things happened in the past? And then I was told that this is not possible. I said, you have not told me. This is not reasonable. You are giving so much help to the new arrivals. In October last year, I sat to the CS4A and I asked to meet with the secretary, Mrs. Carrie Lam, as well as the other senior officials. Not one of you was willing to see me. The day before yesterday, Mrs. Lam said in EXCO that we should tolerate the mainlanders, but we cannot do that, Undersecretary. Last time I went to mainland China, I was not feeling well, and I needed the ambulance service. I asked the immigration department, how can Hong Kong people get ambulance service? And then he said, there is a fee on a per kilometer basis. So from here to, for example, St. Teresa's Hospital, you can choose whatever hospital you like, but then you have to pay a fee. But if we can't afford to pay, then what? Sorry then. You have to see whether anyone can help you cross the border to get ambulance service. All right, thank you. Time is up. Now, I would like to extend this meeting for 15 minutes. Now, rooms are tightly booked today, so at the end of 15 minutes, we have to adjourn at once. So please seize the time, members. Now, I would like also to ask the Undersecretary to make an overall response to all deputations. Concerning support for carers, the administration gives much importance to it. 10 odd years ago, one of the reasons why I returned to Hong Kong was that there are carers in my family taking care of other family members. So that's why we are also very concerned about this topic. For elderly care service, the increase is very big. For rehabilitation, there's 34 billion, and then it's increased to more than 800 million, more than 8 billion. So the increase is very big. And then under CCF, there's a pilot scheme on living allowance for carers to elders and as well as the disabled. This is a pilot scheme. We are doing a study. We hope that there will be a long-term assessment for us to determine the way forward. In the pilot scheme, Not only the quota is increased, the allowance amount has also been adjusted. I won't repeat the point because I explained that already. Many deputations also said that apart from money, there's the need for service. Now, many carers are also old age people, or they also need to be taken care of. So just now, we heard that many carers need time for rest. There are also special children's needs, elderly, disabled people. There are diversified services. Why? Because we have to make sure that we can meet carers' needs. Just now, deputations referred to the different needs among carers who take care of elders and the disabled. Now, of course, we have to catch up on service. Right now, the waiting time is long. A number of deputations talked about information and awareness of our service content. This time, in relation to reinforcing the outreach service, we have done a lot. Starting December 2018, SWD has increased funding for elderly care service centers and also outreach service. So the elders and the carers don't always need to come to us. We also reach out to them because we have heard you. This involves 23.8 million of recurrent expenditure. We want to cover the communities. We need to visit various buildings. Many hidden people are not only elders but carers as well. Sometimes in some households there are two elders and also disabled people. They don't know about the service, so we have to reach out to them and tell them what services are available. The service teams make telephone calls and visits to the elderly. We also have to offer emotional counseling or support service. Sometimes, well, we know that emotional support is important to carers, so we will enhance that. Apart from reaching out to them, there is one point often made by deputations, and that is the respite service should be reinforced. Well, we know that right now, SWD is going to enhance the information system for respite service. So we hope that vacancies on respite service can be made known to those in need. So we hope that in Q4 this will be completed. We need to buy more places. As I mentioned in my beginning remarks, in the 2018 policy address, it said that the government planned that in 2019 there will be an increase of 2,000 places, altogether 9,000. And then under the pilot scheme, there will be 7,000 beds altogether for respite service. Many deputations requested us to beef up the supply. And then in the second stage, there are 131 offering 2,400 daycare service places and 4,100 home care places. In terms of our planning, we have enhanced our daycare service centers. At the end of 2018, there are 35 development projects offering daycare service center premises. In 2019, we can offer 3,700 residential places, both subsidized and non-subsidized, and also additional daycare service places. We know that these are not enough. For example, for private land, we will start phase 2, and we will increase the number of service units. In December 2018, under Hong Kong Planning Standards and Guidelines, there is a ratio on elderly service. So definitely we want to increase service. And then very quickly, I will move on to the next point. In the coming 3 years, for the disabled, we are very concerned about their community and also district support service. So we will have 5 more such centers. For the autistic people, there will be 5 centers to support them. There will be more manpower and additional resources for home care service. And then there will be travel support. For support centers, right now there are 6, and this number will go up to 19 gradually. I will not add further points. I will leave some time for members to ask questions. Thank you. We have to adjourn at 1:25 sharp. Fernando Zheng, Siu-kin will be speaking for the second time. Luk Chung-hong, first round. Thank you, Chairman. A lot of my points have been made by deputations. Thank you, carers, for your points. Thank you for what you have done for the needy. You have helped the government to alleviate the burden a lot. So the government has the responsibility to offer more support to the carers. There are 2 points made by many people. I don't think the government should spare effort on that. Concerning the carers' allowance, the application criteria are very harsh. So income has to be below median income, and then there's only 50%. We're not talking about a low income earner allowance. These people have given up their job, and they have love and care for their family members. In fact, they help the government save money. So for this allowance, I think it is best not to do means test. Even if there is means test, you shouldn't set such harsh standard. So sometimes when people live with their family members, their income cannot meet the means test. Besides, publicity is not enough. I hope the government should catch up with time. So now we are always talking about Hong Kong being developed into an innovation and technology center. And recently I visited the Happy Aging exhibition. A lot of technology is for helping the elderly at home. For example, sensors, bathing device, GPS device that can be worn on the body and so on. I'm not very familiar with them. Then can the government offer financial assistance to help those who are in need, especially the grassroots, so that they can buy products in this area to alleviate carers' burden? And then regarding respite service, well, there is a tiered system. If you earn higher income, then the fee will be more expensive. If you don't receive allowance, well, some of these services are rather expensive. So some said, well, at least I should have certain quota every year. As a carer, I need time to rest and do personal things. So how can you make sure that there would definitely be places available? Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Regarding the pilot scheme on living allowance, the SWD has commissioned Hong Kong U to do a study to look into future development direction. And then concerning aging technology, it is very important. So right now in residential care homes, they are now using some of these technologies. Rehabilitation organizations can use them as well, so that the living environment can be improved for those who are being cared for, and the possibility of injury of the carers can be reduced. Manpower sometimes is a challenge. So in relation to money, service, manpower, we will improve our planning. Apart from money, the biggest problem is that we have to catch up with the service needs. We need to train more social workers and professionals to offer these services. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Fernando Chung. A simple question. Just now, the Undersecretary said a study will be done to review the carers' allowance, and he said very soon there will be the outcome. We are worried because it seems that no one knows that you are doing this review. Are you going to do public consultation? There are so many deputations here today, so many carers. So is there a way for them to give you comments for your review? Thank you, Chairman. For this assessment, it is almost completed. Well, for example, today and also at CCF consultation forum, we have heard many people's views. Then are you going to publicize the review? Well, that work belongs to CCF and also Poverty Alleviation Committee. But are you going to publicize the study outcomes? If you ask about the content, we will see how we can let you know the findings and also the analysis, the related analysis. The answer is rather odd. So I asked whether they are going to publicize the findings, yes or no. It seems that senior government officials are rather wicked in giving answers. Just now, I heard Ms. Choi saying that carers may come across emergency situations. Sometimes they will also fall sick and they may have emergency things to take care of. But then in Hong Kong, there is not emergency support or emergency break. So are you going to take that into consideration? Right now, there's respite service. Well, do we have enough bed spaces for emergency service? Undersecretary, I'm referring to emergency. I'm not referring to applications made a few months in advance. Just now, Ms. Choi said she needed the ambulance because she had to go to the hospital, but then she had to leave behind an elderly person with dementia or a disabled person who cannot take care of himself or herself. Then that is a very helpless situation. Chairman, perhaps our SWD colleague can explain the workflow. Thank you, Chairman. For respite service for the elderly or residential respite, we do not have the rule that applications have to be made a few months ago as long as there are places. We understand that there is the need. So at some residential care homes with bought places, we have increased the number of bought places, and we hope to increase the number of places significantly. And then about outreach service, please do not refer to other services. Those are not emergency services. You will ask for physical examination report, medical records, medicine information, and lung or X-ray of the lungs. Please do not just make these irrelevant points. Just answer my question directly. Now there is no emergency respite service, and I am asking whether you will consider introducing such a service. You don't have this service right now. So let's say at midnight, if they need to go to the hospital, are you going to tell them to call up each and every organization after getting the information from the website? As my colleague said just now, if there is the need, especially for the elders, we do have the residential places based on the existing utilization rate. So that means you do have this service right now, yes? So at midnight, if people call any of the organizations on the list, there will be people taking the call, and if it is an emergency, there will be people picking up the person in need, right? It all depends on how urgent the situation is. We have a few dozen emergency places in subsidized homes. Let's take Ms. Choi as an example. All of a sudden, she felt very unwell. She called for the ambulance. And the medical professionals said that she had to go to the hospital, but then she could not leave her husband at home. So under those circumstances, please tell me what kind of emergency services are available to her. Well, we have to look into this specific case. I have told you all the details already. What else do you need? We need to look at the exact time, the availability of places. It's difficult for us to ask the organizations to arrange car pickup during midnight. So you do have this service, but it's difficult for you to ask the organizations to do it, right? I cannot promise because you are talking about small hours in a day, and it all depends on whether the organizations can make an arrangement. It's difficult for me to say for sure. This is nonsense. The carer himself or herself has problem. Can you hear me? Well, the question is very clear.
When there is an emergency situation, how are you going to deal with it? The mic is not on. The interpreter cannot hear. Well, exasperation is a waste of energy. Mr. Siu-kin. Chairman, public hearing, such is the end of a public hearing, that it ends with a lot of yelling and shouting. The official should not say that, well, it comes to an end, well, there's some expression of anger, well, that's the end of it, and then that's for another time. Now, I can see that the Undersecretary are giving very rapid responses, and I wonder if this gesture interpretation can be done. Well, he is reciting a series of responses, and for the public hearing, the deputations and individuals are speaking slowly and hesitantly. Well, perhaps that's the difference between whether you really experience the pain or you are painless. Now, I'd like to repeat what Mrs. Choi has said. Well, I'd like to give my time to her. You are presently here, so you are a real case here. Well, you have listened to the Undersecretary and the PSA. What is your response? It is not the first time that I raised this question. It was first raised in 2014. Have you really considered this problem? We are elderly debutants. I really have a real needs. I don't have any children or other relatives. And if I have vomiting or diarrhea or fever, and in such an emergency situation, I need an ambulance to take me to the hospital, and I leave behind my spouse. What will happen? Would he have food? Would he can he warm something up? And I suffered a lot in the hospital, but once my vomiting ceased in the hospital, I had to call back to take care of him. So I hope that one day there will be mechanisms and institutions that can offer us help. 30 seconds for the response from the officials. I don't have anything to add. I have given you the explanation. Well, you said that you had no specific case, and so you could not respond. Well, We hear you have a specific case. Well, you know that we have no choice. We cannot choose the time to be hospitalized. Well, is that a blind spot when you cannot foresee the time of when such things happened? Once she's hospitalized, when the spouse has needs, we will follow up. So when she is hospitalized, we will offer temporary respite residence or help for her spouse. We will enhance board places so that we can have places that can cater to the needs of such emergency cases. The social worker says that you should bring your spouse to the emergency ward. So that is a solution? Well, she doubts whether she can be treated, but whether her husband can be treated as well. The mic is not on. The interpreter cannot hear. Chair, I think the question is clear. Well, that's a blind spot that we have. My friend on the left has stated her case very clearly, and I think that for the administration, it is easy to understand. You have no arrangements for such a case. I hope that we are at the starting point for carers. And we hope that the panel on social welfare can have a follow-up. Time is up, and I'd like to thank all the deputations individuals present here for submitting their views. Thank you.